Good morning.
Good morning.
This is Palm Sunday, right?
Yes.
We're getting ready to enter into that Easter celebration. The time when we all pay special attention to preparing meals for those that we love and appreciate. Our topic this month is the nourished soul. So we want that meal to be prepared for everyone else to love and appreciate. We want to prepare a similar meal for ourselves. A meal made up of spiritual food. After all, on Palm Sunday, that's the day when we enter into a consciousness of peace. That's the day when we become aware of our Christ nature. That's the day when we humble ourselves and we move from a vision of physical to material to spiritual understanding. Palm Sunday, when Jesus entered Jerusalem to a resounding cheers. But as he made his way through the town, he took time to turn over a few tables. And when he turned over those tables, he was telling us that we need to cleanse our mind, body, and soul of all of the error thinking. The nourished soul. Reverend Lisa's goal for us this month is simply to provide the substance needed to manifest and sustain your best life. You see, when we acknowledge and hold in consciousness the essence of spiritual food, that spiritual food will enhance our expectations to fully express the desires of our life. For that to happen, we must have a nourished soul. You see, our life expressions, the manifestation of all of our desires, is dependent on that very nourished soul. When we recapture and sustain the image of a Christ-like nature, we're able to continuously nourish our soul. When we consciously seed our subconscious mind with the spiritual ideas of the Christ perfection, we continuously nourish our soul. When we eliminate, when we unlearn, when we gain control over the physical tendencies that hinder our spiritual illumination and our spiritual understanding, then we are nourishing our soul. For without proper nourishment, our spiritual growth gets stunted. Spirit never stops working. It's always providing, it's always moving, but it can only move upon the food that you give it. It can only move upon the idea in your mind that you plant within it, that it must produce. So the garden of our soul, when it lacks the divine nutrients to produce the heavenly crops we desire, when our garden is malnourished and our soul contains the weeds of fear and doubt, when our garden does not receive the proper seed, it's infected with greed and selfishness, it has parasites of disease and hatred. But all of those things can be extinguished with a generous helping of spiritual truth. A nourished soul is enriched with eternal life-giving concepts of sincerity, justice, faith, full givingness, fearlessness, and love. For you and me to recognize, for us to unify, for us to realize our Christ nature within, that is what provides the soul with proper nourishment. So no more fast food of immediate gratification. We need to add more fresh fruits and vegetables to our diet. We need to partake of the bread and the wine of the Last Supper. That universal substance that supplies the soul, mind, and body with divine energy, with spiritual awareness, with internal perfection. The nourished soul consumes food with divine ideas. That food is steamed with affirmative words. That food is sauteed in an expression You see, when the soul is fed properly, it gives us the strength to roll away the stone of all of our physical limitations. A nourished soul is infused with the nature of Christ, the only begotten Son. We must believe and know that life is an eternal journey, seeking and realizing God's perfection within us. The perfection revealed as Jesus, the universal Christ, must be resurrected in you. Ernest Holmes tells us this in our text, Finding Christ. He says, Christ is the universal idea of sonship with God. And we are all members of that one divine family. We all express the Christ at the degree of our acceptance of his thoughts, his words, and his actions as our own. Philippians 2:5 reminds us to let the mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. You see, when we find the Christ in ourselves, we can properly nourish our soul. When we become more like Jesus, we discover our oneness with all of life. You see, Jesus performed all those so-called miracles. He was only able to do it by unifying with the indwelling presence of God within him. He wasn't demonstrating his exceptional power. He was showing us how to use an exceptional power. Now, if I said that in a lot of places, they would accuse me of being blasphemous. They would accuse me of denying the uniqueness and the power and majesty that was bestowed on Jesus the Christ. But Jesus said this. He said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And there are many who've interpreted that passage to mean that Jesus is the only way to be saved. That Christianity is the only path to God. I have a news flash for you. Jesus didn't adopt Christianity. Christianity adopted him. His ministry touched people of all faiths, all beliefs, and all cultures. He ministered to the Jews, he ministered to the Greeks, he ministered to the Romans, even the Samaritans and the Pharisees. He did not pull away from them. He accepted all who came to him, no matter what they looked like, where they came from, or what they believed. Amen. You see, those very Jews which he was a part of represents our individual inner consciousness. The Greeks represent our intellectual reasoning. The Romans represent our dominating will. And see, those Samaritans, those were those mixed up folks, like many of us, they were made up of Assyrians and Hebrews, meaning there was a conflict between spiritual and physical. And we all know the Pharisees was his primary adversary. They were those high religious ideas that believed unless you thought exactly as they did, unless you worshiped just like them, that you were of an evil source. They accused him of being the devil himself. They said, if you don't think, if you don't say, and you don't do exactly like we do, and many of you have heard this when you decided to take a new thought posture, you're going to hell in a handbasket. Jesus had nothing to do with any of that. That was somebody's interpretation of what he said. But when Jesus was in the prime of his ministry, he did radical stuff. He embraced women in his ministry when women weren't accepted as students of spirituality. In that old traditional religion that was being taught, y'all couldn't get involved in nothing. Jesus took one of the so-called worst women walking the face of the earth, cleaned her up, and made him his woman forever. Everywhere he went, if you read the New Testament, she was there. Everywhere. She was at the Last Supper. She was at the foot of the cross. She was there when the stone was rolled away. She was there when he ascended into heaven. Now, if that wasn't his woman, I don't know what else to tell you. physical presence being the way. He was saying that I, the Christ, I, the embodiment of power and presence of God, I, the truth, spiritual nature of God, that's the way. My way of thinking is the way. My way of speaking is the way. My way of believing is the way. My universal spiritual truth, that's your way. My understanding that there is only one power, that is no respecter of persons, that's the way. That's why I honor and respect all denominations, all spiritual principles that Jesus taught, no matter who's teaching them and no matter what they call it. Y'all know I believe your religion is how you live, not what you call yourself. Now before, because Rena's going to post this online and people might find out where I live, so let me clean this up just a minute. Do I believe that Jesus was unique? Absolutely. There's no one on record in history that demonstrated the use of the power within like Jesus. He's the only example of a human giving way to the divine that we have. He's the perfect example of man giving way to God, flesh giving way to spirit. He's the one who denied division and embraced all of unity. Jesus the man is the living embodiment of the Christ. But Christ is a principle, not a person. He wasn't the only one chosen, but he was the one that chose to teach all of us how to use that divine power. He said, the things that I do and even greater things shall you do. He came to teach us that all that dwells in our soul and our spirit is in every man and every woman. He came to demonstrate how to recognize the law of God as the nature of your soul. He proclaimed oneness without separation, exemplified the complete harmony with spiritual truth. He represents the Christ presence, the God idea of yourself that's available to each and every one of us at all times. The Christ consciousness is the best nourishment that we can get for our soul. That indwelling Christ is our spiritual center by which all thoughts must be harmonized before we can express our true divinity. Ernest Holmes goes on in our text to tell us he describes the soul as the doer or executor of the will of spirit that has no choice of its own. Its only business is to reflect the image that spirit cast into it. It can't do anything until you think something. And whatever you seed it with will be produced in the body of your experiences. You see, the soul doesn't have a conscious choice, but it has the consciousness to execute your desire of the spirit that you reveal as your body experiences. That spirit, that Father, that mind, that's what initiates this thing. The soul, the Son, the Word is what activates the thing. And that body, the Holy Spirit, the expression, that's what demonstrates the thing. Your thoughts, your words, your actions will always manifest as your life. Within us is a spiritual law working out the will and purpose of your conscious thinking. Our thoughts, what you think and believe, that's what provides the nourishment to your soul. The soul produces the content of our individual and our collective thinking. I'm going to read something to you in the book of Acts. And this was a time when the Pharisees and the Romans and all those who were against the teaching of the Christ were mobilizing, if you will. They were trying to quiet down those who were talking about him. But Peter, who was faith, and John, who was love, they refused to shut their mouth. And here's one of the things they said. They said, now the congregation of believers were of one soul and of one mind. Not one of them spoke out, the property he possessed as his own. But everything they had was in common. And the apostles testified with great power concerning the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And they were already favored. There was not a man among them who was destitute. For those who possessed fields and houses sold them and brought the money for the things that they were sold, and placed them at the disposal of the disciples. And the proceeds were then given to every man according to his need. And then Joseph, who the disciples named Barnabas, which represents the entrance of the Son into our lives. He was a Levite of the county of Cyprus. He had a field and he sold it. And he brought all the money and placed it at the disposal of the disciples. This scripture, it talks about a congregation. That congregation represents the multitude of your thoughts, of the one mind and the one soul. It represents those thoughts working in harmony for the good of everyone, not just yourself. You see, they weren't thinking about themselves. They were focused on their oneness of God. The apostles, as we all know, represent those spiritual faculties working together within you that make all things possible. The resurrection is the resurrection of the mind, the soul, and the body from a material to a spiritual consciousness, which allows you to express the whole man and woman. When you do that, you are greatly favored when you deny the sense and call forth the eternal spiritual expression that is your life. When that happens, we're all made whole. We can sell off our material sense thoughts and gain spiritual understanding, which is more valuable than money. We're nourished with understanding and spiritual discipline in a harmony of thinking that ensures that all of our needs will be met. And then it talks about Joseph, that imagination that gives us the vision to see the increase so our dreams can be realized. JB. And I ain't talking about the JB y'all had last night. I'm talking about Joseph of Barnabas. He was a comforter. The scripture says he was a Levite from Cyprus, which means he was honest, he was just, and he realized favorable conditions. You see, the properly nourished soul produces a field of great reward. The properly nourished soul gives all of humanity the seeds of a loving and affirmative thought. You see, next week y'all gonna have Easter dinner. You either cooking or you gonna buy something and take it over there and claim you cooking. But if everyone's Easter dinner supplied their soul with a 6-course meal. A 6-course meal that started with faith on a bed of spiritual strength. Followed by judgment seasoned with unconditional love. Add to your plate some imagination baked in the power of God's word. Yes. Somebody is going to prepare a casserole that was simmered in metaphysical understanding. Somebody's going to take that fresh zeal and wrap it in divine order. And somebody is going to eliminate salt and season it with a spiritual attitude of gratitude for dessert. Come on. You see, if we eat right, if we consume a steady diet of spiritual substance, the soul, the Son, the Word, the nature of God will provide you with everything that you need. Right. It will rid the body and all of humanity of disease. Yes. It will eliminate all the catastrophes in this world. Yes. Kindness, joy, and love and happiness will be the forecast for every day. We'll all be on one accord. I came here just to tell you one thing and one thing more. Only your high, holy thoughts, when those are the thoughts that occupy your subjective consciousness, then and only then will the mission of Jesus be completed in your life. Every soul will be nourished by the consciousness of the Christ. The nourished soul will ingest the Christ presence. The nourished soul will digest principles of understanding. The nourished soul will eliminate all that is contrary to the Christ nature. The nourished soul will manifest the healing power that was embodied by the only begotten Son. The nourished soul will resurrect the oneness and the spiritual of the universal Christ. I'm going to leave you with this. There's some simple words from a great theologian and writer named John Chapel. He says, though Christ 1,000 times in Bethlehem be born, if he is not born in thee, your soul is still forlorn. God bless you.